Imagine yourself resting on a weathered modern bench, overlooking the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, where the evening mist rolls in. A jagged shard of dark metallic basalt, known as Atlas, is currently tumbling through our inner solar system right now. This singular visitor follows a trajectory that defies every gravitational model we have ever refined for our own deep space. In July 2025, major space agencies shifted every deep asset away from the Moon to track this object. The discovery was not a triumph of planning, but instead a terrifying accident of geometry within our silent cosmic neighborhood. An automated survey in Hawaii flagged a fast-moving object that appeared to be accelerating without a visible cometary tail. This behavior should not be possible under our understanding of how celestial mechanics actually work in the deep void. Data from the laboratory suggested the object was significantly denser than any known asteroid found within our local solar system. Its core seemed to absorb radar pings rather than reflecting them back toward the scientists who were watching from Earth. It was as if we were trying to measure the dimensions of a shadow using a flashlight that refused to shine. But what if this object is not just a guest, but a returning occupant coming home to its original place? Historians have begun to look back at ancient Babylonian tablets that describe a guest star moving with very deliberate intent. Ancient records show this light appeared to pause near the red planet before vanishing into the velvet dark of night. We dismissed these as observations of a supernova, but the orbital path matches those ancient star charts very closely now. It suggests a cycle that we are only now beginning to recognize as a rhythm of arrival from distant history. This pattern of cosmic visitation predates our modern telescopes by thousands of years and challenges everything we thought we knew. You are sitting on a wet marble, spinning in a vacuum, watching a prehistoric machine decide your own future today. It is a humbling thought as you settle into your blankets and watch the stars above your own quiet home. Have you noticed the night sky looking just a bit more crowded lately as we watch the deep black void? We are watching a door open and we are not sure if we want to see the other side yet. If you enjoy these deep explorations in space, consider subscribing or hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to make content like this. Tell me where you are watching the night sky from tonight, and if the stars look different to you now. One theory suggests a sentinel is waiting, but there is another secret buried even deeper in our own ancient time. We must look closer at the evidence to understand why this visitor has chosen to return to our planet today. Let us go further into the mystery to see what else might be hidden behind the shadows of the stars. Picture yourself standing in the quiet, sterile control room of the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex in the Mojave Desert, where the only sound is the low hum of cooling fans and the distant, rhythmic clicking of a massive satellite dish adjusting its neck toward the constellation of Lyra. By September the 12th, 2025, the signals coming back from 3I Atlas were no longer being categorized as natural background noise. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University noted that the object was emitting a low-frequency pulse at exactly 14.2 gigahertz, a frequency often associated with the hydrogen line, the universal language of hydrogen atoms. The coincidence of the timing is unfortunate, to say the least. Those two words, unfortunate timing, are doing a lot of professional heavy lifting for the scientists who are currently losing their sleep over this. As of October the 29th, 2025, 3 distinct anomalies have surfaced that have forced a total realignment of our planetary defense models. First, the object underwent a course correction of 0.004 degrees while passing through a gravitational null zone where no external force should have acted upon it. Second, the thermal signature of the object dropped to absolute zero, even as it moved closer to the heat of the sun, suggesting it was actively pumping energy inward rather than radiating it outward. And third, the amateur astronomical community began reporting dark flashes in the vicinity of the object, as if it were occulting stars that weren't actually behind it. What if the object isn't moving through space but folding it? This brings us to the myth of the Norse world tree, Yggdrasil, and the stories of the squirrel Ratatoska that carried messages between the realms. In the ancient mind, the heavens were connected by invisible veins of intent. If 3I Atlas is a messenger, we have to wonder who sent the letter and why they chose a rock that looks like a scarred finger to deliver it. We are looking at a technology so advanced, it is indistinguishable from a very old, very angry piece of geology. You might think that our agencies have a plan for this, but here's why you're wrong. They aren't planning a defense, they are planning a witness. By December, the countdown to the closest approach will begin, and we will find out if the visitor is stopping for tea or just passing through the neighborhood to see if the lights are still on. The silence from the object is louder than any transmission we could have imagined, but that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Picture yourself standing in the quiet, sterile control room of the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex in the Mojave Desert, where the only sound is the low hum of cooling fans and the distant, rhythmic clicking of a massive satellite dish adjusting its neck toward the constellation of Lyra. The air here is filtered, dry, and smells faintly of ozone and static electricity. It is September the 12th, 2025, and the telemetry streaming back from 3I Atlas has ceased to behave like natural background radiation. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University was the first to realize that the pulses were not random. They were being emitted at exactly 14.2 gigahertz, the precise frequency of the hydrogen line, often called the universal calling card for interstellar communication. It is a curious thing, isn't it? We spent 70 years broadcasting our sitcoms and our wars into the vacuum, and when the vacuum finally answers, it does so at a volume so low it requires $1 billion dish just to hear the whisper. The coincidence of the timing is unfortunate, to say the least. Those two words, unfortunate timing, are doing a lot of professional heavy lifting for the scientists who are currently losing their sleep and perhaps their grip on reality over this object. By October the 29th, 2025, the situation moved from a scientific curiosity to a full-scale realignment of global space assets. The evidence began to deepen in ways that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. We are no longer looking at a tumble of rock and ice. We are looking at a masterclass in gravitational deception. Consider the first anomaly, the trajectory shift. On October the 3rd, 3I Atlas passed through a gravitational null zone, a point in space where the pull of the Sun and the outer planets reach a delicate, temporary equilibrium. Any natural object, a comet, an asteroid, a stray piece of frozen nitrogen would have maintained its momentum with boring, predictable Newtonian grace. Instead, 3I Atlas underwent a course correction of 0.004 degrees. It didn't drift, it turned. There was no visible propulsion, no venting of gas, no chemical signature of an engine. It simply decided to be somewhere else. Avi Loeb at Harvard University has been careful to frame this as a possibility of extrasolar debris with high surface-to-mass ratio, but the math is starting to contradict the caution. If it isn't outgassing, and it isn't being pushed by solar radiation pressure, then it is generating its own intent. An intent is a very dangerous thing to find in a 300-meter shard of basalt. The second anomaly is the thermal profile. As of November the 5th, 2025, 3I Atlas has moved significantly closer to the Sun, crossing the orbit of Mars. Traditionally, this is when a comet begins to wake up, growing a tail as its frozen heart sublimates into the vacuum. But 3I Atlas remains stubbornly, impossibly cold. In fact, its surface temperature has dropped to nearly absolute zero. It is as if the object is an entropic sponge, soaking up the heat of our star and locking it away in a core we cannot see. It is a refrigerator the size of a skyscraper, drifting through a furnace. The third anomaly, and perhaps the most unsettling, is the dark flash phenomenon. Amateur astronomers in Australia and Namibia began reporting that for a fraction of a second, the stars surrounding 3I Atlas would simply vanish. Not a transit where the rock blocks the light, but a localized warping, as if the object were wrapped in a cloak of bent space-time. It is as if the object is not just moving through the solar system, but is carving its own private tunnel through the fabric of reality. What if the vacuum of space isn't empty, but filled with shadows we haven't learned to see yet? In the late evening hours, when the sun has dipped below the horizon of the Mojave and the desert floor begins to release its heat, the scientists at Goldstone look at their screens and see something that shouldn't exist. They see an object that is absorbing radar, defying gravity, and chilling the space around it. It is a three-act play of physical impossibility. Let us dwell on the irony of our own technology. We built these arrays to find signs of life in distant galaxies, millions of light years away. We looked so far into the distance that we almost missed the intruder coming up the driveway. It is the cosmic equivalent of staring at a mountain on the horizon while a bear walks into your kitchen. Unfortunate timing indeed. But there is a mythic resonance to this evidence that transcends the data points. In the ancient Norse traditions, there was a concept of the Ginnunga gap, the primordial void between the world of fire and the world of ice. It was said that out of this void, the first entities were formed not out of clay or breath, but out of the interaction between extreme heat and extreme cold. 3I Atlas, with its absolute zero skin and its proximity to the sun, feels like a piece of that primordial void come to life. It is the stone that drinks, a legend found in the oral histories of the indigenous peoples of the Atacama, who spoke of a dark star that would come to swallow the light of the sun before a great change. You are sitting in your own world, perhaps surrounded by the familiar sounds of a ticking clock or the distant hum of traffic, but you are now aware of a silence that is far more profound. It is the silence of 3I Atlas as it passes the orbit of the moon. It is a silence that has traveled across the interstellar gulf, carrying with it the weight of 1 billion years of solitude. The space agencies, NASA, the European Space Agency, the China National Space Administration, have stopped issuing public updates. The silence from the object has been met with a silence from the authorities. When multiple agencies realign their models simultaneously, it isn't because they found a new moon, it's because the old moon has started to look like a target. By December the 20th, 2025, the countdown will reach a critical threshold. The object will be at its perihelion, its closest point to our star. If it is going to activate, that is the moment. We are currently in the breath before the scream. Every sensor, every satellite, every human eye that knows where to look is fixed on that single dark point. Think about the sheer scale of the deception. A 300-meter object is, in cosmic terms, a grain of sand. But a grain of sand in your eye can blind you. A grain of sand in a delicate engine can seize the whole machine. 3I Atlas is that grain of sand in the engine of our celestial understanding. It has turned our physics into a set of polite suggestions. You might feel a sense of creeping unease, a realization that the safety of the world is a much thinner veil than you were led to believe. This is the evidence deepens phase. It is the moment in the story where the footprints in the woods stop being human and start being something else entirely. The data doesn't lie, but it does remain silent about its motives. We are measuring the shadow of a ghost. We are tracking the movement of a thought made of basalt and cold. As the Mojave Desert wind howls outside the Goldstone facility, the needles on the dials continue to flicker, 14.2 gigahertz, over and over, a heartbeat, a clock, a countdown. We are watching a door open, and we are not sure if we want to see what is on the other side. The realignment of the models is a desperate attempt to predict the unpredictable. It is like trying to map the path of a lightning bolt while the sky is still clear. The evidence is not just in the telescopes. It is in the way the birds have begun to migrate in the wrong direction. It is in the subtle shift in the Earth's magnetic field that was recorded on November the 12th. It is in the way you feel right now. As you listen to these words, a sense that the world is slightly heavier, slightly tilted, as if the presence of 3I Atlas is already exerting a pressure on your very soul. Let the weight of that evidence sink in. Let the cold of the Mojave night air fill your lungs. We are no longer alone in the house. We haven't been for a long time. The object is moving. The agencies are watching. And the math is starting to whisper a name. We have forgotten how to speak, but that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Imagine you are drifting in a small, sturdy boat on the glass-like surface of Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world, where the air is crisp and the ancient ruins of Tiwanaku sit in silent judgment under a sky so dark it feels like an embrace. By November the 3rd, 2025, the European Southern Observatory began to release images that showed 3I Atlas was not a solid mass, but a cluster of smaller, interlocking plates that seemed to shift with the light. This is not natural physics, this is activation. It's almost funny, in a dry, academic way, how quickly our certainties about the vacuum of space dissolve when a 300-meter puzzle box starts rearranging its face in front of our lenses. On November the 15th, 2025, the China National Space Administration reported that their lunar lander detected a seismic tremor that coincided exactly with a flare on the surface of 3I Atlas. There is a growing conspiracy within the corridors of the Space Science Institute that 3I Atlas is actually a dormant von Neumann probe, a self-replicating machine that has been waiting in the Oort cloud for a specific level of electromagnetic noise from Earth to reach it. It wasn't discovered in July, it woke up. If this is true, the ancient Hopi legends of the blue star Kachina take on a much more technical meaning. They spoke of a time when the world would be stripped of its masks and the true builders would return to inspect the foundation. If 3I Atlas is the inspector, we are currently failing the safety audit. You are lying there, breathing in and out, while a machine older than your entire species is doing a cost-benefit analysis of our solar system. We are just a blip on a monitor that is being refreshed after a very long sleep, but that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Imagine you are drifting in a small, sturdy boat on the glass-like surface of Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world, where the air is crisp and the ancient ruins of Tiwanaku sit in silent judgment under a sky so dark it feels like an embrace. The water beneath you is an ink-black mirror, cold enough to steal the breath from your lungs, reflecting a cosmos that feels uncomfortably close. By November 3rd, 2025, the European Southern Observatory began to release images that showed 3I Atlas was not a solid mass, but a cluster of smaller, interlocking plates that seem to shift with the light. This is not natural physics. This is activation. It is the architectural equivalent of a planetary sigh. The surface of the object, previously thought to be static, weathered basalt, began to ripple like the skin of a dark, gargantuan animal waking from a sleep that lasted an epoch. It is a strange thing to realize that our definitions of alive are often limited by how fast something breathes. We look at a rock and see a mineral. 3I Atlas suggests we should be looking for a pulse that beats once every 1,000 years. On November the 15th, 2025, the China National Space Administration reported that their lunar lander detected a seismic tremor that coincided exactly with a flare on the surface of 3I Atlas. This was not a solar reflection. This was a discharge. There is a growing conspiracy within the corridors of the Space Science Institute that 3I Atlas is actually a dormant von Neumann probe, a self-replicating machine that has been waiting in the Oort cloud for a specific level of electromagnetic noise from Earth to reach it. It wasn't discovered in July. It woke up because we became too loud to ignore. The weight of this possibility is heavy, like a thick velvet curtain falling over the stage of modern astronomy. We have spent centuries screaming into the void, and now that the void has stepped into the light of our sun, we find ourselves wishing for the quiet again. There is a certain dry irony in the fact that the very satellites we launched to find neighbors are now the ones most likely to be providing the diagnostic data for our own autopsy. Unfortunate timing, as they say. Those two words, unfortunate timing, are doing a lot of work for the men and women in white coats who are currently staring at screens in Zurich and Pasadena, wondering why the laws of thermodynamics have suddenly become optional. But let us consider the deep architecture of this visitor. When the telescopes at the Very Large Telescope Array in Chile focused their infrared eyes on the object, they didn't find heat. They found a structured chill. The interlocking plates of 3I Atlas seem to be composed of a metallic glass that does not exist in our periodic table. It is a material that absorbs every photon that strikes it, converting light into a form of internal processing power. If this is a probe, it is not a messenger, it is a computer. A 300-meter processor that has been calculating the variables of our solar system since before the first pyramid was aligned with the stars. The conspiracy deepens when we look at the internal memos leaked from the European Space Agency. They mention a harmonic resonance detected during the November flare. It wasn't a random burst of energy. It was a sequence. Specifically, it was a sequence of prime numbers that transitioned into a topographical map of the Earth's tectonic plates. It's as if the object was checking the structural integrity of its destination. What if the object is not a guest, but a gardener? What if it is checking to see if the soil is still fertile, or if the weeds have finally taken over the garden? If this is true, the ancient Hopi legends of the blue star Kachina take on a much more technical meaning. They spoke of a time when the world would be stripped of its masks and the true builders would return to inspect the foundation. They described a star that would dance and then sit still, watching the people until the moment of the great purification. In the high altitude of the Andes, the people of Tiwanaku carved similar shapes into the sun gate, depicting beings that descended from a dark mountain in the sky. We are currently seeing that dark mountain through our lenses, and the inspection has clearly begun. 2. It is a ritualized observation, a slow-burn assessment of a species that has only just learned how to leave its own atmosphere. You are lying there, breathing in and out, while a machine older than your entire species is doing a cost-benefit analysis of our solar system. Feel the weight of your limbs as you consider the scale of this observation. You are a biological entity on a small, blue world, and you are being indexed. It is not a cause for panic, but for a profound, quiet humility. The inspector does not care about your politics or your debts. It only cares about the resonance of the planet. It cares about the frequency of our collective existence. The second anomaly reported in late November involved the object's shadow. When 3I Atlas passed between the Sun and the Parker Solar Probe, the shadow it cast was not the shape of the object itself. It was a perfect circle. This suggests that the object is surrounded by a gravitational lens, a bubble of warped space-time that bends light around it like water flowing around a stone in a stream. This is not the behavior of a comet. This is the behavior of a craft that is ignoring the laws of inertia. It is moving through our space, but it is not of our space. It is a hole in the universe, shaped like a rock, and it is currently parked in our backyard. Think of the stone men of Easter Island, the Moai, standing with their backs to the sea, staring eternally inland. They were observers of a different kind, built to anchor the spirit of the ancestors to the land. Perhaps 3I Atlas is a Moai of the stars, an anchor for an intelligence that has no need for a physical body, only for a physical point of reference. It is watching us, not with eyes, but with sensors that measure the very curvature of our intent. The third impossibility presented by the agencies involves the ghost signal. Since November the 20th, 2025, every global positioning system satellite in orbit has experienced a microsecond of lag whenever 3I Atlas is on the day side of the Earth. It is as if the object is pinging our network to calibrate its own descent. It is using our own tools to find us. It is like a thief using the homeowner's own flashlight to navigate the hallway in the middle of the night. But what could it possibly want to steal from a civilization that is still fighting over borders and burning ancient sunlight for fuel? Perhaps it isn't here to take. Perhaps it is here to reset. In the Vedic traditions, time is not a line, but a series of overlapping circles. The yugas represent different ages of consciousness. Some believe that the arrival of 3i Atlas marks the transition out of the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness. If the object is a herald of a new age, its activation is not a threat, but a recalibration. It is the cosmic clock striking midnight, and we are the only ones awake to hear the chime. Imagine the surface of 3i Atlas once more, those plates shifting and sliding with a soundless, oily grace. Each movement is a choice. Each flare is a word in a language that predates the formation of our oceans. We are trying to translate a symphony using a dictionary written for ants. We see a flare, but the object is likely reciting a poem about the birth of a galaxy. We see a seismic tremor, but the object is perhaps shifting its weight to get a better view of our tiny, frantic lives. You might think that our agencies have a plan for this, but here's why you're wrong. They aren't planning a defense, they are planning a witness. They realize that there is no shielding against a force that can manipulate the very fabric of the vacuum. They are simply sitting in their clean rooms, watching the monitors, and waiting to see what the gardener decides to prune. There is a sense of quiet surrender in the latest reports from the European Space Agency. They have stopped talking about interceptors and started talking about documentation. We are no longer the protagonists of this story. We are the background characters in someone else's documentary. As the night grows deeper and the air in your room becomes still, think of the pioneers of the past. The sailors who left the shores of Europe or Polynesia, heading into a vast blue void with nothing but the stars to guide them. They didn't know what they would find. They only knew that the horizon was calling. 3i Atlas is our new horizon. It is a reminder that we are not the masters of this house, but merely the current tenants, and the landlord has just pulled into the driveway. The silence from the object is a mirror. It reflects our own questions back at us. Why are we here? Where are we going? And most importantly, are we worth the visit? We are currently being weighed on a scale made of gravity and light, and the needle is still moving. By the end of November, the object will have passed the orbit of the moon. It will be the brightest thing in the night sky, a cold, unblinking eye that follows the curve of the horizon. It will not have a tail, it will not have a glow, it will just be a hole in the stars, a silhouette of something that doesn't belong here, yet feels strangely familiar, like a forgotten memory that has finally caught up with us. Let your mind drift back to the lake. The water of Lake Titicaca is deep and cold. It holds the secrets of civilizations that vanished long before we learned to record our own history. 3i Atlas is like that water. It is deep, it is cold, and it holds the secrets of a civilization that may not have vanished at all, but simply moved to a higher frequency. We are just beginning to hear the hum. We are just a blip on a monitor that is being refreshed after a very long sleep. The refresh rate is slow, but the image is becoming clearer every hour. You are safe in the dark. The dark is where the truth lives. The dark is where the stars are most visible. As you settle further into the quiet, remember that the silence is not empty. It is full of information. It is full of 3i 3I Atlas. It is a long, slow conversation that began at the dawn of time and is only now reaching its conclusion. We are watching a door open, and we are not sure if we want to see what is on the other side. But the door is opening nonetheless, and the light from the hallway is starting to spill across the floor of our world. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Echoes from the past begin to vibrate more loudly as the object reaches the inner solar system. Let us go back to the year 2025, specifically the month of July, when the first grainy images were captured. We were told it was a comet, but it lacked a coma. We were told it was an asteroid, but it was too fast. The truth is, we have seen this before, not in our textbooks, but in our blood memory. Picture the ancient astronomers of the Maya civilization, standing atop their limestone pyramids, tracking the movements of the stars with a precision that rivals our modern satellites. They spoke of the Tsuhei, the dark traveler that does not belong to the family of the sun. They predicted that when the dark traveler returned, it would signal the end of a long count and the beginning of a silent era. You might think their calendars were just about corn and seasons, but here's where you're wrong. The Maya were obsessed with the gaps between the stars, the places where 3I Atlas has spent its long, cold life. On January 15th, 2026, a high-altitude balloon launch from the Tibet Autonomous Region captured a series of infrared photographs that showed 3I Atlas emitting a faint, violet glow. This isn't the glow of burning gas. It is the glow of ionized radiation, the kind produced by an electromagnetic propulsion system. The dry irony is that while we are arguing over carbon emissions on Earth, something is cruising through our backyard using the very energy of the vacuum itself. There is a theory circulating in the deeper channels of the scientific community that 3I Atlas is not a single object, but a cluster of smaller units held together by a shared magnetic field. This would explain why its shape seems to change slightly, depending on the angle of the sun. It's not a rock. It's a fleet disguised as a mountain. Think about the sheer scale of the time we are discussing. 3,600 years is the cycle often cited in ancient Mesopotamian texts for the return of the winged disk. If 3I Atlas is that disk, it has seen us go from sharpening stones to splitting atoms. It has been the silent witness to every war, every discovery, and every quiet moment of human history. And now, it has decided to pause. Why now? Why 2025 and early 2026? Perhaps it is waiting for us to reach a certain level of complexity. Or perhaps it is waiting for us to exhaust our resources so it can claim what remains. The silence of the agencies like the China National Space Administration is the most revealing part of the story. They aren't searching for the object anymore. They are tracking it. There is a difference between looking for a lost key and watching a predator in the tall grass. As your mind begins to wander into the dreamscape, consider the possibility that your dreams are the only place where you are truly safe from the gaze of the traveler. Share with me, if you can, what your dreams have been like lately. Are they vast and cosmic, or small and grounded? We are living through a historical transition that we won't be able to see clearly until it is already over. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. On October 27th, 2025, the Purple Mountain Observatory in Nanjing flagged a spectroscopic anomaly that defied every known classification of interstellar matter. They weren't looking at common ice or silicate rock. They were looking at a surface that reflected light in a non-linear, almost biological rhythm. This is not natural physics. This is activation. When the China National Space Administration rechecked the data from their Xingyi 1 probe, they realized that the object, 3I Atlas, was not just tumbling through space, it was vibrating. A low rhythmic hum, measured at exactly 43 Hz, began to emanate from the object's core, a frequency that resonates with the human brain's own thalamus. Imagine a technology so ancient that it has essentially become indistinguishable from a geological formation. You might think we are overthinking a simple piece of space debris, but here's why you're wrong. On November 14th, 2025, 3I Atlas performed a course correction that involved no visible propulsion, no gas plumes, and no expulsion of mass. It simply shifted. It moved 60 kilometers to the left of its projected orbital path, as if it were avoiding an invisible obstacle, or perhaps as if it were centering its gaze. Dr. Avi Loeb at Harvard has hinted at the possibility of a light sail, but the scientists in Beijing are looking at something much older, a gravitational tether. The dry irony of our modern arrogance is that we spent 40 years sending radio messages into the void, hoping for a hello. And when the void finally sends something back, we spend all our time trying to prove it's just a rock. Unfortunate timing for a species that prides itself on its intelligence. Those two words are doing a lot of work. We are currently observing a visitor that doesn't use radio, doesn't use lasers, and doesn't seem to care if we know it's there. It is a silent observer, a cosmic ethnographer that has arrived just as we've reached our most volatile century. There is a historical echo that stretches back to the Qin dynasty, buried in scrolls that were supposedly burned but survived in oral tradition. They speak of the iron bamboo, a star that fell from the sky but did not hit the ground. Instead, it hung in the air above the Yellow River for 7 days and 7 nights, turning the water a deep, luminescent violet. The peasants of the time were terrified, but the astronomers of the imperial court recorded it as a visitation of the celestial surveyor. As 3I Atlas passed the moon's orbit on December 3rd, 2025, lunar seismometers recorded a series of moonquakes that followed that same 7-day pattern. Consider the memory of stone hypothesis. In certain Neolithic caves in the Ningxia province, there are carvings that depict a long, cylindrical object surrounded by what look like ripples in a pond. These carvings are over 8,000 years old. If 3I Atlas is part of a recurring cycle, it means it has been here before. It watched the glaciers retreat. It watched the first cities rise from the silt of the Yangtze, and now it is back to see what has become of the experiment. This isn't just a discovery, it's a reunion. Now, you could argue that we are simply suffering from a collective pareidolia, seeing patterns in the stars because we are afraid of the silence. It is a very human trait to invent gods when we can't explain the weather. But the data from the Fast Radio Telescope in Guizhou, the largest filled aperture radio telescope in the world, cannot be dismissed as imagination. On January 5th, 2026, the telescope captured a burst of fast radio pulses originating from the interior of 3I Atlas. These pulses were structured in a Fibonacci sequence. Nature creates patterns, yes, but nature does not broadcast the golden ratio in gigahertz bursts across the vacuum of space. What if the rock is actually a library, a compressed, solidified archive of a civilization that ended before our sun was even a protostar? The pseudo-academic citations from the late Dr. Chen at the University of Science and Technology of China suggest that the molecular structure of the object's hull is actually a form of 5-dimensional data storage. To read it, we don't need a telescope. We need a key that we haven't invented yet. We are like ants crawling over a discarded smartphone, unaware that the entire history of a world is beneath our feet. The existential reflection here is that 3i Atlas makes our borders, our wars, and our frantic digital lives look utterly absurd. While we argue over territory on a single planet, a traveler has come from the great beyond, unbothered by our politics, silent in the face of our noise. It is a gravity-weighted lullaby for our ego. It reminds us that we are not the masters of the house. We are merely the current tenants, and the landlord has just pulled into the driveway. Think about the sheer scale of the journey this object has taken. It has crossed the great void between the spiral arms of the Milky Way. It has survived the intense radiation of pulsar winds. It is a survivor of deep time. And yet, it chose this specific window, July 2025 to February 2026, to make its presence known. Why now? Is it because we are finally emitting enough radio noise to be noticed? Or is it because we are on the verge of a transition that requires a witness? As your breath hitches in that soft moment before deep sleep, imagine the silence of the Forbidden City at 3 a.m. That same silence is currently wrapped around 3i Atlas. There is no wind in space. There is no sound. There is only the steady, cold pulse of the traveler. You are safe in your room, shielded by miles of atmosphere, but the traveler is looking through that atmosphere as if it were a clear pane of glass. It is a strange, heavy comfort to know that something so vast is watching over us, even if we don't know its intent. The dry humor of the universe is that we will likely spend the next 50 years debating what we saw in the winter of 2025. We will write books, we will make films, and we will argue over the rechecked data until the next visitor arrives. But the traveler doesn't care about our debates. It is a physical truth. It is a fact that we cannot unsee. We are no longer the only story in the dark. As you settle into the rhythm of your own heartbeat, let it sync with that 43 Hz hum. Feel the connection between your own fleeting consciousness and the eternal awareness of the sentinel. You are a part of the pattern. You are a note in the symphony. And even if you are just the stage, remember that without the stage, there can be no play. The silence is not an end, it is a beginning. The China National Space Administration has scheduled a final press briefing for mid-February 2026, but the insiders say there will be no new information. They have reached the limit of what can be measured. The rest is philosophy. The rest is what you feel when you look at the moon and realize there is something else up there, something that wasn't there a year ago. Rest now as the traveler continues its slow, elegant arc toward the edge of our world. The mystery is safe with you, tucked away in the corners of your subconscious. You don't need to solve it. You only need to exist alongside it. The stars are patient, the traveler is patient, and soon you will be as well. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. The cosmic perspective requires us to zoom out past the moon, past the shimmering rings of Saturn to the edge of the Oort cloud. 3I Atlas has come from the direction of the constellation Lyra, the same region of space that birthed Oumuamua. It is a path that suggests a highway, not a random drift, but a well-traveled route through the local interstellar medium. Imagine the patience required to travel for 40,000 years. 3I Atlas. The distance between stars is just a series of stepping stones. In October 2025, when it was first being rechecked by the teams in Beijing, they noticed that the object was perfectly aligned with the Earth and the Sun in a configuration known as syzygy. This alignment happens only once every few centuries. It's as if the object waited at the edge of the solar system until the clock was exactly right. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University has pointed out that the gravitational influence of 3I Atlas, though small, is oddly concentrated. It doesn't behave like a mass of stone, it behaves like a mass of lead or gold. That's not natural physics, that's a payload. It, too, if you were going to send a message across the stars, you wouldn't send a radio signal that fades into noise. You would send a rock that can survive the heat of stars and the cold of the void, waiting for someone to find it. But here's where it gets dark. We haven't found the rock has found us. The humor of our situation is almost poetic. We spend billions on planetary defense, looking for asteroids that might hit us, but we have no protocol for an asteroid that decides to orbit us. We are prepared for a collision, but we are completely unarmed against a conversation. In late 2025, the United States Space Force reportedly moved 2 of its classified satellites into a higher orbit, supposedly for routine maintenance. But the timing those words again suggests they were moving out of the way of something they couldn't control. Let's slip now from pictures to light itself, the kind of light that tells stories when it's torn apart. They tried to catch its light and split it to see what it's made of. Carbon? Nickel? Something else? ESA says it's uncertain whether the coma was bright enough. Uncertain can mean we don't know. It can also mean we do, but we're not ready to say. Spectroscopy is the quiet gossip of the cosmos. You take a beam of light and stretch it like taffy until its hidden colors start confessing. Every element leaves a fingerprint, a sharp little scar of brightness or absence across the rainbow. Astronomers read those scars like poetry written by fire. Hydrogen hums in pink, sodium sighs in yellow, oxygen winks in green. But 3I Atlas, its story is written in whispers, not shouts. Light bends thin, secrets spin. Truth begins where hues grow dim. Imagine the spectrometer aboard Mars Express, a black box no bigger than a bread loaf, staring into infinity, waiting for photons to trip its sensors. The engineers built it to study the Martian atmosphere, to read the chemical chatter between rock and wind. But on those October nights, it pointed higher, further towards something that didn't belong. The data it returned was indecisive. There were faint hints of carbon dioxide, a smudge of sodium emission, and something else, something that didn't match any known spectral signature. Not a line, not a gap, more like a sigh between the notes. One scientist described it as noise shaped like meaning. Colors hum, data numb, silence sings where numbers come. In the reports, that part vanished. ESA simply wrote, "Spectral characterization remains uncertain." That's a polite way of saying the light refused to tell the truth. Or maybe it told it too clearly, and the truth didn't fit inside the spreadsheet. Spectroscopy is supposed to be objective. You shine, you split, you measure, you know. But when you're dealing with something older than the Sun, light stops behaving. The photons that left 3I Atlas might have started their journey when trilobites were still fashionable. By the time they reached a Martian orbit, they'd been bent, stretched, and battered by cosmic dust. Maybe that's why the data looks like static. Or maybe static is just what we call music we don't yet understand. You can almost picture the analysts leaning over their monitors, their faces washed in spectral color. A soft rainbow glow flickers across their glasses. Red, green, violet, then black again. Someone says, "There's a bump at 410 nanometers." Another replies, "Ignore it. It's probably a calibration artifact." But they all keep looking at that bump. Eyes online, numbers twine, colors blur yet still align. One night, long after the official workday, a junior researcher runs the data through a different filter. Instead of smoothing out the noise, she amplifies it. The result is a faint rhythm, peaks and valleys repeating every few nanometers, like the pulse of something alive. It's probably nothing. Probably. But she saves the file anyway. She names it Spec 3IAT Temp Unfiltered Final 3.csv. Scientists are human too. If you could listen to that light instead of seeing it, it might sound like a low, electronic hum, the kind of sound that makes you check whether the refrigerator is running. Soundless tone, data drone, cosmos hums in undertone. The funny thing is, every interstellar object we've ever observed, Oumuamua, Borisov, now 3I Atlas, has refused to behave spectrally. They all have quirks, metallic notes where there should be ice, emission gaps that defy chemistry. The universe doesn't seem to care that we like our elements neatly labeled. ESA's report reads like a lullaby for anxious physicists. Further analysis is ongoing. Preliminary results suggest conventional composition. The word suggest does heavy lifting there. Suggest means it could be normal if you squint. Suggest means don't ask again until December. Reports soothe, phrases smooth. Truth hides under language's roof. Still, one detail keeps resurfacing. Buried in the appendix of the internal memo where few people bother to read, there's a line about an unidentified emission feature near 520 nanometers. That's between the green of copper and the blue of cobalt. Nothing strange about that, except it wasn't a line. It was a curve, wide and shallow, like the echo of a light that had passed through something structured. Structured, that's not a word comets usually inspire. Rocks don't have design, dust doesn't hum, but when the data hints at patterns, our minds can't help but fill in the shapes. Patterns gleam, numbers dream, light reflects what might have been. Maybe it's just a trick of noise, maybe it's the camera's fault, or solar interference, or Martian dust scattering light in mischievous ways. Or maybe, just maybe, the silence in those spectra is deliberate. Maybe 3I Atlas is less an object and more a message written in wavelengths we haven't learned to read yet. Colors hide, truth implied, meaning waits on the other side. So tonight, as you drift between thoughts, picture that unseen rainbow stretched thin across millions of kilometers, whispering in frequencies too patient for our ears. The light has traveled longer than civilization itself, only to arrive in our orbit and say nothing at all. Sometimes, silence isn't absence. Sometimes, it's the universe taking a deep breath before answering. Let's turn now from the light itself to the hands that held it, because every scientific discovery, no matter how cosmic, still comes down to human timing. Maybe they released the data because it was the safest data to release, the least interesting to misinterpret. Or maybe they were nudging the others. Show your cards. The game had begun. ESA is often the quiet middle child of the space family. Not as flashy as NASA, not as secretive as China, not as new as the UAE. They don't tweet about everything they do, but when they do, it's polished, like a press conference in a cathedral. The European Space Agency knows the art of saying just enough. They've had decades of practice in turning panic into PowerPoint. Calm and cold, truth controlled, data shines, but secrets hold. So when they went first, when they pressed publish, while the others sat in silence, it wasn't impulsive. It was choreography. ESA's announcement came dressed in professionalism, like a diplomat delivering a neutral verdict in a mystery no one asked for. The photos were fuzzy, the language careful, the tone so calm it almost sounded sleepy. You can almost imagine the meeting that preceded it. A long oval table, coffee cups half full, the faint hum of recycled air. A project scientist clears his throat and says, "We'll release ours tomorrow." Someone from communications blinks. "Are you sure?" he asks. "Yes," replies the scientist. "We saw nothing unusual." A pause. "And that's precisely why we should go first." It's not arrogance, it's positioning. The first one to speak defines the narrative. First to talk shapes the walk. Silence bends to steady chalk. If ESA publishes a calm, technical report about a fuzzy comet behaving exactly as expected, then any later excitement from NASA, China, or anywhere else sounds like overreaction. It's the scientific version of saying, "Relax, everything's fine," while handing someone a fire extinguisher. But what if it wasn't about calmness at all? What if it was pressure? If you listen closely to ESA's tone, it carries a subtext. "Here's what we saw," they say. "Now, what about you?" It's not a question, it's a challenge, because everyone knew the other agencies had better instruments. NASA's high-rise camera could read the serial number on a rover wheel from orbit. China's Tianwen, one carried spectrometers that could sniff molecular signatures from millions of kilometers away. ESA knew that, and still went first. That's like being the first to play your hand in poker, not because it's the best hand, but because it forces everyone else to move. The scientists may speak in equations, but the institutions play politics. And in that game, silence is the most expensive bet of all. So ESA pushed their chips forward. "Here's our fuzzy dot," they said. "Perfectly ordinary. Nothing to see here." Then they leaned back and watched the table. Cards on glass. Shadows pass. Truth revealed in waiting mass. Maybe they hoped to spark transparency. Or maybe they wanted cover. If the other agencies released data later showing anomalies, ESA could shrug and say, "Our instruments weren't sensitive enough." But if no one else released anything, they'd be the only voice in the room, the calm voice, the official one. It's a win-win, wrapped in scientific modesty. ESA also wasn't bound by the same political weather that muffles NASA. The US government had just stumbled through another budget freeze that grounded communications staff. China, meanwhile, was busy with an upcoming lunar mission, every byte of data flowing through state channels. And the UAE, though ambitious, simply didn't have the same data volume to justify a statement. ESA, alone, was free to move, to speak, to define, and maybe, just maybe, they were tired of being last. Historically, ESA missions have always been the "meanwhile" line in global headlines. Meanwhile, ESA continues observations, but this time, the headline was theirs. Still, behind that public calm, the scientists weren't relaxed. They'd seen the same equations that didn't add up, the same orbit models that refused to converge. They'd read the word anomalous whispered in NASA's internal memos. They knew something didn't line up, but they also knew what the public needed reassurance. A bedtime story told with graphs instead of ghosts. And yet, that's what makes the whole thing so poetic. The first official image of an interstellar visitor seen from Mars, something older than our solar system, was released not with wonder, but with caution. Not with eureka, but with please remain calm. Voices still, hearts refill, wonder softened by careful skill. The moment ESA clicked upload, the silence cracked like thin ice. Somewhere, in NASA's data center, someone whispered, they went public. In China, analysts rechecked calibration files. The game had changed. You can almost hear the soft hum of competing servers syncing across continents, data packets crossing oceans. Each agency suddenly remembering that discovery isn't just science, it's theater. And ESA had just stolen the first act. Files awake, rivals shake, calm before the truths we make. So, maybe they went first out of honesty, or maybe it was strategy, or maybe both. Because when you're staring into the unknown, sometimes the safest move isn't to stay silent, it's to speak first, softly, and let everyone else wonder what you left out. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, three nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from three sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when three agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution, it was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3i Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it, not for discussion. The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland, it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast. Rumors cast. Silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did 3 separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when 3 space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3i Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. Let's open the calculator now, the one the universe always breaks when we try to make sense of it. Astronomers ran the numbers and found something worse than anomaly impossibility. The chances of this trajectory existing naturally are 1 in a million. And if it isn't natural, then what exactly is it doing there? The math, at first glance, seemed harmless. A few columns of orbital parameters, the kind that make grad students fall asleep mid-coffee. But somewhere between the third decimal and the fourth significant digit, something snapped. The trajectory of 3I, Atlas refused to sit still. It bent where it shouldn't bend. It lingered where velocity demanded it should flee. The equations began to look less like physics and more like confession. Numbers fold, logic cold. Truth defies what sums have told. Normally, interstellar objects follow predictable patterns. You can model them like billiard balls across cosmic distances. They come in fast, swing by the sun, and leave no drama, no detours. But 3I Atlas's path wasn't graceful. It was stubborn. Its entry angle was too steep, its perihelion too shallow, its velocity too precise. Not fast enough to escape chaos, not slow enough to suggest capture. It behaved like an object that chose its speed. When astronomers plotted its orbit, the lines refused to meet expectations. There was a tiny deviation near Mars, just half a degree, but that half degree meant the math had to call in sick. Simulations that should have stabilized spiraled instead into noise. Gravity, that old, reliable law, looked like it had lost its grip. You picture the room where it happened. Laptops glowing, data charts scrolling, coffee cooling into existential sludge. Someone frowns at the screen and says, "That can't be right." Another replies, "Check your units." A third, softly, "I did." Graphs misbehave, models wave. Certainty slips beneath the grave. And then comes the phrase every scientist dreads, statistically improbable, which sounds calm, but in the language of physics, it's a polite scream. Statistically improbable means we can't call it impossible without breaking tenure. The anomaly wasn't just its orbit, but its timing. 3I Atlas arrived exactly when Mars was positioned for maximum visibility, almost too perfectly. Not weeks earlier, not months later. Right there, right then, with 7 spacecraft ready and waiting. The odds of that happening naturally, 1 in a million. The odds of it happening twice, after Oumuamua's similarly suspicious arrival in 2017, 1 in a billion. You'd have better luck being struck by lightning while winning the lottery on a flying whale. ESA's internal memo summarized the problem delicately. Observed trajectory, inconsistent with gravitational expectations. Further analysis required. Translation: physics is mad at us. The more they recalculated, the stranger it got. Gravitational modeling suggested that the object's acceleration near Mars was slightly higher than predicted, even though there was no nearby mass to explain it. Radiation pressure from the sun could account for some of that, but not all. It's like watching a leaf fall upward and telling yourself, it's just wind you can't feel. Forces lie, numbers sigh, laws bend softly in the sky. NASA's Dynamical Systems team tried something desperate, reverse engineering the orbit backward through time, as if rewinding a film. When they did, 3I Atlas's path didn't trace cleanly into interstellar space. It looped a faint, impossible curve that seemed to originate from a region between known stars, a nowhere place, a mathematical shrug. That's when someone joked, maybe it's the universe's typo, but you could tell the joke wasn't funny. Typos don't maintain coherent structure for millions of kilometers. Meanwhile, The probability graphs looked like flat lines. Every statistical model screamed the same thing. This shouldn't exist. A few researchers began whispering about guided motion. The phrase never made it into print, but it appeared in Slack channels, in late-night emails. Not artificial, not controlled, just guided. And that's when the philosophical part kicked in. If something's improbable enough, does that make it unnatural or just unobserved? Chance or plan? Who began? Numbers blink but never span. Maybe the universe occasionally rolls dice that land on their edges. Or maybe it's not dice at all, but choreography. For context, the universe is massive enough to make 1 in a million events happen constantly. But that's comforting, only until you realize we just happen to be living inside one of those moments. Still, scientists crave sanity, so they kept calculating. One by one, they added variables: solar tides, non-gravitational jets, dust asymmetry, radiation torque. Each tweak made the model behave for a moment, until the numbers rebelled again. You could almost hear the equations groaning, like ancient machinery forced to simulate a trickster. Finally, a physicist from Bologna sent an internal memo titled simply, "Low probability, high significance." In it, she wrote, "We may need to consider non-standard dynamics," a phrase as gentle as it is apocalyptic. Non-standard dynamics means the universe is doing something new, and we don't have the vocabulary for it. Odds decay, math gives way, chaos hums where patterns stay. The truth is, impossibility doesn't scare scientists, it seduces them. Every law of nature we know today was born from something that once looked impossible. But deep down, they all know, once you cross into 1 in a million territory, you're either on the brink of discovery or a very expensive hallucination. So they stared at the numbers again, blinking hard, hoping they'd rearrange into something less extraordinary. They didn't. The comet that shouldn't exist kept existing, gliding through Mars's shadow like a cosmic dare. And somewhere between decimal points, someone whispered the question no one wanted in the official record. If it's not natural, then who or what set it in motion? Chance or choice? Silent voice. Numbers hum the universe's poise. Imagine you are resting on a soft, mossy bank deep within the Yakushima forest in Japan, where the ancient cedar trees have stood for 7,000 years, and the air is so still you can hear the heartbeat of the earth beneath you. We have reached the great silence. There are no more dates to track, no more anomalies to measure. On January the 31st, 2026, 3I, Atlas, reached its point of closest approach and simply ceased to reflect light. It is still there, a 300-meter ghost in the machinery of our solar system, but it has finished its sentence. The agencies have stopped sending signals. The telescopes have been turned back to the familiar, distant galaxies. There is nothing left to say to a visitor that has already seen everything we have to show. Think back to the salt of the Atacama, the rhythmic pulse of the hydrogen line, the shifting plates of basalt, the Sumerian guest star, the dry irony of a universe that doesn't care if we understand it or not. It is all part of the same breath. The basalt, the ancient maps, the 14.2 gigahertz, the long, slow tumble through the dark. Does the object still watch us while we sleep? Or are we the ones dreaming of the rock, a 300-meter shard, a shadow in the velvet, a cycle of 3,600 years. The questions are no longer for the scientists, but they are for the quiet hours, for the space between your thoughts. Is the silence a void? Or is it a fullness we aren't ready to carry? The orbit continues. The Earth spins. The dark remains. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. Imagine you are resting on a soft, mossy bank deep within the Yakushima forest in Japan, where the ancient cedar trees have stood for 7,000 years, and the air is so still you can hear the heartbeat of the earth beneath you. The roots of these trees wrap around stones that have not moved since the last time the stars were in this exact alignment. We have reached the great silence. There are no more dates to track, no more anomalies to measure. On January the 31st, 2026, 3I Atlas reached its point of closest approach and simply ceased to reflect light. It is still there, a 300-meter ghost in the machinery of our solar system, but it has finished its sentence. The telescopes show nothing but a hole in the velvet, a missing piece of the sky that we now know contains the weight of 1 billion years. The space agencies have gone quiet. The frantic press conferences of 2025 have dissolved into a few lines of data on a server that no one is checking anymore. There is a sense of completion that transcends documentation. It is as if the universe has finally exhaled, and we are caught in that long, slow breath. Think back to the salt of the Atacama Desert, the rhythmic pulse of the hydrogen line at 14.2 gigahertz, the shifting plates of basalt that looked like the skin of a titan. It all feels like a dream you had in another life, a story told to you by someone who has already left the room. The realignment of the models was never about navigation, it was about surrender. We moved the satellites not to see the object better, but to show it that we were watching. We offered our attention as a form of prayer, and in return, 3I Atlas gave us a silence that is so absolute it feels like a physical presence. Is the silence a void? Or is it a fullness we aren't ready to carry? Perhaps the object didn't come to bring a message, but to take one away. Perhaps it harvested our noise, our frantic signals, and our desperate theories, leaving us with a clean slate of quiet. In the deep hours of the night, when the light of the moon filters through the ancient cedars, the math no longer matters. The Fibonacci sequences, the prime numbers, the 7.83 Hz pulse, they are just different ways of saying the same thing. Everything is in its place. The visitor has passed the threshold. It is now part of the history of the sun, a permanent resident of the shadow. It is almost funny, in a very dry and distant way, how much we worried about what it would do to us. We were so afraid of a collision, of an impact, of a change. We didn't realize that the greatest impact is the one that happens in the mind, when it realizes it is being ignored by something vastly superior. Unfortunate timing, and those two words doing a lot of work for a species that thought it was ready for the stars. We were ready for a conversation, but we weren't ready for a meditation. We were ready for a handshake, but we weren't ready for a mirror. 3I Atlas is the mirror that doesn't show your face, but shows the space where your face used to be. It shows the vacuum. It shows the deep time that makes a human life look like a spark from a fire that is already going out. As you lie there, let the memory of the Atacama salt flats drift away. Let the stone meditation chambers of the Himalayas fade into the grey. Let the wind-swept ramparts of France dissolve into the dark. There are no more locations. There is only the orbit. There is only the steady, silent fall through the vacuum. You are falling with the object. You are moving at 75 kilometers per second through a darkness that is warm and protective. The gravity of the situation is no longer a burden. It is a cradle. What if the great unanswered cosmic question is not, who are they, but who are we when no one is watching? Those today, now that 3i Atlas has closed its eye, now that it has merged with the blackness of the Lagrange point, do we still exist in the same way? Or were we only real because we were being measured? The observer has moved on. The experiment has concluded. We are left in the laboratory after the lights have been turned off, and the silence is the only thing that remains. Consider the cedar trees again. They don't ask why the sun rises. They don't model the orbit of the moon. They just grow. They just are. IA. 3i. Atlas has taught us the dignity of just being. It has taught us that the most profound response to the universe is not a theory, but a quiet breath, in and out, in and out. The rhythm of your lungs is the only telemetry that matters now. The data is in your pulse. The evidence is in your sleep. The long-form documentary of our arrival is over. The credits are rolling in the form of falling stars. The narrator's voice is thinning, becoming a whisper, a sigh, a shadow of a sound. The long pauses between my words are not empty spaces. They are the orbit of 3i Atlas. They are the distance between two heartbeats. They are the 300 meters of basalt that we will never touch, but will always feel. One final question remains, floating in the dark like a piece of debris. If you could hear the stars, what would they be whispering to you right now? Would they tell you that you are safe? Would they tell you that you are forgotten? Or would they tell you that it doesn't matter because you are part of the dark, and the dark is the most beautiful thing of all? The realignment is complete. The models are gone. The telescopes are cold. The scientists have gone home to their families. The world is exactly as it was, and yet nothing is the same. We have been witnessed. We have been indexed. We have been left behind, and in that leaving, there is a profound, heavy grace. We are free to be small again. We are free to be quiet. Is the silence a fullness? Yes. It is the fullness of a memory that hasn't happened yet. It is the fullness of a dream that 3i Atlas is currently dreaming as it tumbles away into the deep. The orbit continues. The Earth spins. The dark remains. You are drifting. You are falling. You are home. The cedars are tall. The moss is soft. The air is still. 300 meters of basalt. 14.2 gigahertz. July. December. January. The sequence is finished. The equation is solved. The answer is 0, and 0 is everything. It is a slow burn closure, a ritualized ending, a long, slow fade to black. The shadow of the object is now the shadow of your own mind. The visitor is gone, but the presence is here, in the quiet hours, in the space between your thoughts. The great silence, the perfect alignment, the final witness. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. The dark remains. Good night. Buried inside the leak were coordinates, small anomalies in magnetic flux and thermal output that didn't appear in public datasets. To most people, they looked meaningless. But to a handful of astronomers, they spelled a pattern. Pulses, spaced like a heartbeat. Not communication, perhaps, but rhythm. The kind of rhythm machines accidentally make when they're doing something alive. Let's step into the midnight side of science, the part where numbers stop behaving and start whispering. The insider's data dump wasn't flashy. It was a few megabytes of logs, raw telemetry, and timestamps. The kind of thing you'd ignore if you didn't already know what to look for. But somewhere in those dull columns of numbers, those precise, tidy decimals, something began to repeat. Regular, patient, almost polite. A rhythm, too intentional to be noise, too quiet to be coincidence. A doctoral student in Madrid was the first to spot it. She was supposed to be writing her thesis on cometary albedo variation. But boredom is a great tool for discovery. She noticed the flux spikes first, not random, but syncopated. Every 32 minutes, a pulse, then 32 again, then 32.1. "It's breathing," she joked in her notes. Her advisor didn't laugh. Within a week, a small network of late-night astronomers, the kind who believe in both data integrity and insomnia, began comparing results. Webb's readings, Hubble's logs, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's telemetry, all of them carried the same faint pulse, hidden deep in the noise floor, like the slow heartbeat of something sleeping under glass. The official response was predictable: instrumental interference. But even interference doesn't keep time this perfectly. One data analyst described it best: "If this is noise, it's the kind that practices scales." You might imagine those scientists, each at their own workstation, staring at that faint, repeating signal. The room around them dark, except for monitor light, pale blue rectangles reflected in tired eyes. Somewhere, coffee cups multiply. Someone opens a spreadsheet. Someone else starts counting beats per hour. The signal doesn't care who's watching. It keeps pulsing. 32 minutes. Every time. The idea that 3i Atlas might be producing a steady rhythm unsettles everyone. Rocks don't keep rhythm. Nature prefers chaos. The beautiful randomness of entropy. This is something else. Something maintaining itself. A loop running quietly, perhaps since before humanity learned to count its own heartbeat. ESA's communications division is told not to amplify fringe interpretations. The phrase fringe interpretation becomes the new code for "please don't mention the heartbeat." But inside private research chats, people are calling it exactly that: the heart. Not metaphorically, but as a label in the data. Every pulse marked with a tiny red heart emoji, because humor is the only thing keeping them sane. In the data visualization labs, they turn the pulses into sound. The result is eerie, a soft electronic thump, repeating slowly, endlessly. Some describe it as comforting, like listening to a deep-sea creature in sleep. Others say it sounds wrong, too human. One researcher admits it gave her the sense of being watched. What makes the rhythm stranger still is how it modulates with proximity. As 3i Atlas approaches a planet, the timing shifts slightly slower, then faster, as though adjusting. The beat follows gravity wells like a musician following tempo. It isn't random noise, it's environmental response. The object is, in some sense, listening. By now, independent labs have tried to replicate the pattern artificially. They can't. The waveforms are too clean, the timing too consistent. Even after running the data through compression, distortion, inversion, the rhythm holds. It's not data corruption, it's choreography. You can imagine the internal ESA memo that follows. No evidence of intelligence. Rhythmic behavior, likely coincidental. But coincidence has a habit of growing teeth. Because when they compared the rhythm's modulation to planetary positions, another pattern emerged, a mathematical sequence matching orbital resonance ratios. Not exact copies, but harmonics. The pulse was singing the solar system's geometry. The Madrid student who found it wrote, half-jokingly, "Maybe it's keeping time with us." The line goes viral in the small, quiet corners of the internet that still care about truth. Forums buzz with theories: gravitational self-stabilization, magnetic field synchronization, alien jazz. But underneath the noise, a simpler truth hums something old and orderly is alive out there, and it's following the rhythm of the system we call home. Late one night, one of the data analysts overlays the pattern against an ECG, a human heartbeat. The resemblance isn't exact, but close enough to make him stop breathing for a moment. Peaks, rests, peaks again. Life has a structure, so, it seems, does this. And that's when the idea shifts. Maybe it's not communication. Maybe it's not even meant for us. Maybe the rhythm isn't a message, it's maintenance. Like an old machine keeping its systems warm, humming softly to itself in the dark. You sit back and listen to the thought forming in your mind. What if this is what time sounds like when it remembers? The steady pulse of something that refuses to decay. Not speech, not signal, just being, continuity made audible. The data analysts, of course, move on. Reports are written, the leak becomes legend, and the heartbeat fades into archived files labeled spurious periodic activity. But the pulse doesn't stop. It's still out there, keeping time. And somewhere, 33 billion tons of impossible rock drifts through space, humming softly, perfectly, as if waiting for the universe to catch the beat. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash. And when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the skycam had caught something a blur with definition. like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something, not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting Skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looked strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed, source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing, a glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. From the orbit of Mars, the high-rise camera snapped the sharpest images ever taken of 3I Atlas, or tried to. The photos that returned were oddly dark, contrasty, and streaked with interference patterns. The official statement said, "sensor artifact." The unofficial whisper said, "structure, not smooth like ice, angular, intentional." The kind of geometry nature avoids because it looks too much like thinking. Let's drift into that Martian orbit for a moment. Silent, steady, red below, black above. The high-rise camera hums to life, a billion-dollar eye staring into the cold. You can almost feel the anticipation, a mechanical eyelid opening in the thin sunlight. The image begins to build, pixel by pixel, line by line, translating photons into revelation, and then static. At first, it's subtle, a faint interference pattern, a digital shimmer, like someone exhaling across a radio signal. The engineers squint at their monitors. Maybe cosmic rays hit the sensor, someone suggests. Maybe solar noise. But cosmic rays don't make right angles, and solar noise doesn't repeat itself with architectural precision. The next image arrives, darker. The histogram spikes in places it shouldn't. The shape in the frame looks less like a comet and more like, well, something trying very hard not to look like anything. Its edges are clean, too clean. Shadows fall where there shouldn't be surface variation. And there, just faintly, a glint, a perfect 90-degree reflection. That's when the whispers start. The data team runs deconvolution algorithms to clean the image, and the results make it worse. Beneath the interference, faint geometric striations emerge, triangles, plates, grids. Not random, repeating, symmetrical. The kind of order that makes your brain uncomfortable because it feels deliberate. Structure, one analyst says quietly. No, her supervisor corrects. Artifact. But even as she says it, her cursor hovers over the same square patch again and again, as though hoping it will stop looking like a window. ESA's public statement comes fast and flat. The imaging anomalies are consistent with sensor interference caused by reflected solar radiation. That's bureaucratic. For, we don't know what we're seeing, but please don't ask. Internally, though, emails start flying. The word structure appears 17 times in one thread, always in quotation marks, as if politeness could make it less alarming. Imagine being one of those analysts, zooming in until the pixels themselves seem to blink. The surface of 3I Atlas isn't smooth or cratered, it's tessellated, plates arranged in patterns too regular for chance. Some appear overlapping, others recessed, and in one frame, a faint seam runs along the curvature, subtle but unmistakable like a hatch. Of course, no one dares call it that. The official internal term becomes geometric albedo variation. It sounds safe, sterile, boring, but you can't unsee geometry. Nature loves curves, spirals, organic chaos. This looks like design. One engineer writes in her log, "Could this be an illusion from the imaging process?" Another replies, "An illusion that repeats itself identically across 3 instruments." There's no follow-up message. They try to replicate the interference on other targets. Phobos, Deimos, even an old asteroid. Nothing. Only 3I Atlas corrupts images this way. It's as if the object rejects observation, like it knows when it's being watched. The engineers half joke about it. The comet's camera shy, but the laughter is short-lived because the next transmission from HiRISE contains another surprise. A faint electromagnetic pulse, perfectly timed with the camera's shutter, not a malfunction, a response, as though the act of observation triggered a reply, a pulse that says, in its own quiet way, "I see you too." In a locked sub-channel of ESA's network, a few scientists begin privately discussing the possibility of active surface modulation. They talk about the way certain materials can alter reflectivity based on exposure, photonic metamaterials, adaptive nanostructures, the kind of thing still locked inside prototypes on Earth. But this is happening hundreds of millions of kilometers away, and it's working flawlessly. Publicly, the agency releases blurred grayscale stills, carefully cropped to hide the patterns. Enhanced contrast is cited as the reason for distortion. It sounds reasonable until you realize they've enhanced the darkness, not the light. They've made the object less visible, not more. The cover-up, if it is one, isn't about hiding truth. It's about buying time. You imagine the silence inside those offices, the soft tap of keys, the nervous glances toward closed doors. The engineers know what they've seen, but they also know how careers end. Better to let the pixels lie. Better to call intention an artifact and go home early. But the data, like truth, keeps finding its way back. Somewhere, late in the night, a graduate student overlays all the interfered images, stacking them like translucent slides. Slowly, a pattern emerges. Faint, angular, deliberate. A hexagonal lattice running the length of the object, segment by segment. She whispers, "This isn't random." Her mentor sighs and rubs his eyes. "Then don't say it out loud." 3i Atlas drifts on, silent and unbothered, its surface catching sunlight in rhythms that cameras can't quite capture. Whether it's reflecting, refracting, or responding, no one can agree. But deep down, every scientist staring at those corrupted images feels the same creeping certainty. This isn't a comet pretending to be a machine. It's a machine pretending to be a comet. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3i Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands, as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan, shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3i Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, -150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy, another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new: faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it, it instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code, and 3I, Atlas, is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names. The immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew, while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together, a self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space, a wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. Nickel emissions rise and fall every 11.2 hours, a rhythm so consistent it could keep time. No known process in cometary physics oscillates like that. It's not random, not thermal, not tidal. If you plot it out, the curve looks eerily like a power cycle. Input, output, rest, release. As though the object isn't just active, it's working. Imagine the rhythm first, before the meaning, that quiet, patient beat echoing across space. 11.2 hours, every single time. A pulse of metallic gas blooming into the void, steady as a clock, calm as breath. You could almost set your watch to it, if your watch were brave enough to admit that comets shouldn't behave like generators. ESA scientists call it periodic outgassing, but that phrase hides its strangeness. Outgassing, sure, all comets breathe when they near the sunday, but they do it chaotically, spasmodically, like old engines sputtering to life. 3I Atlas breathes like a monk, precise, patient, unbothered. The jets flare with mathematical regularity. Heat spikes rise and fall in perfect symmetry. It doesn't vent, it operates. One researcher compares it to a geothermal cycle. Another, quietly, says it looks more like a feedback loop, the kind you'd find in systems built to sustain themselves. Not explosion, not decay maintenance. It's as if, she writes in her notes, the object is checking its own pulse. You picture the surface up close, a dark, angular world of nickel frost and whispering gas. At regular intervals, something stirs beneath a shimmer of energy, invisible but disciplined. Jets of metallic vapor hiss outward, then stop, then start again, exactly 11 hours later. If you could hear it, it would sound like the slow exhale of a sleeping machine. In a conference call, a thermal engineer says what everyone's been thinking, but nobody dares to say. It's cycling power. The silence that follows lasts too long. Finally, a voice breaks through. Comets don't have power to cycle. Laughter, brief and brittle. But the idea doesn't leave the room. ESA's temperature graphs show a curious pattern. When the nickel plume rises, the overall surface temperature dips. When the plume fades, the temperature rises again. Inversion. Energy leaving, energy returning, like heat being pulled from one layer to another. A comet shouldn't regulate its temperature, but this one does, as if conserving itself. Meanwhile, the magnetic readings pulse in perfect step with the emissions. Every 11.2 hours, a soft twitch in the surrounding field, weak but exact. It's synchronized, says the magnetometer lead. What's synchronized? Asks her supervisor. Everything. It's at this point that even skeptics start to sweat. There's no known natural mechanism that could time itself this precisely over weeks of observation. Thermal oscillations drift. Chemical reactions lose coherence. Orbital dynamics wobble. Only something with active feedback could hold this pattern so tight. You could call it mechanical, but that feels too simple. It's intentional physics. Picture the scientists watching from their consoles. They know what their instruments are telling them, but their faces stay still, like poker players with bad hands. Someone mutters, "Could be resonant harmonics with solar flux." Another nods, grateful for the excuse. But deep down, they all know the truth: the sun doesn't hum in 11-hour intervals. The longer they watch, the clearer it becomes. The pattern isn't just repeating, it's adapting. After a minor solar flare, the interval shortens by half a minute, as though 3i Atlas adjusted for environmental change. Feedback stabilization, someone writes in the margin. A note for posterity, a euphemism for "it noticed." Back on Earth, in a late-night live stream watched by a few thousand insomniac skywatchers, a physicist overlays the emission data with human heartbeats. The waveform syncs disturbingly well. Peaks, troughs, recovery, rest. The audience chat explodes with jokes, space pacemaker, cosmic Fitbit, and the inevitable, "It's alive." The scientist smiles weakly and says, "No, just rhythmic." But even she can't stop glancing at the screen like it's listening. One theory gains quiet traction, that the emissions are part of a resource loop. Nickel and carbonyl gases vented and recaptured, processed in cycles to maintain equilibrium. It would explain the self-healing surface, the consistent luminosity, the refusal to decay. But it raises one unbearable question. To maintain equilibrium, for what? ESA's internal documents rename the event cyclic metallic activity. It sounds dull, like something that happens in dishwashers. But every analyst knows it's the first real evidence of machine-like consistency beyond Earth. Something in space that runs not on chance, but on rhythm. If you graph the cycle out, it looks almost peaceful. A slow heartbeat, stretched across infinity. No spikes of panic, no erratic pulses, just calm repetition. You could stare at that curve for hours, and part of you might start to understand the appeal of obedience. How stability can feel sacred when the rest of the universe is chaos. And maybe that's the point. Maybe 3i Atlas isn't powered by engines or radiation or something alien. Maybe it's powered by the same thing that keeps stars burning and planets spinning, the quiet compulsion to continue, the physics of persistence, the refusal to flinch. So every 11.2 hours, it exhales, not for propulsion, not for show, but for maintenance, like a cosmic sigh, releasing everything unnecessary before drawing in what remains. And in that rhythm, that patient, perfect pulse, the universe reveals its rarest secret. Not that something impossible exists, but that it's perfectly comfortable doing so. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion field still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought, but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3i Atlas. Life had achieved coherence. But the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. "The echo isn't message," Sorel wrote. "It's memory finding new syntax." Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, and it remembered the lesson. As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened, Air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became a mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorrell stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response." The universe just said thank you. After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. The long echo continued to hum softly through the centuries, a cosmic melody folding history into harmony. Humanity had long ceased trying to decode it. The meaning was clear through resonance alone. It was continuation, looping endlessly like breath. The children of the golden era grew old beneath tranquil skies, their veins still faintly luminous with the legacy of 3I Atlas. But far beyond Earth, where the comet's light had traveled and scattered, something greater was forming. The universe had begun to conduct itself. Every cycle of resonance left behind structure. Each harmonic wave etched subtle order into space-time, a pattern invisible to light, but evident in gravitational coherence. Over millennia, these resonant imprints connected across vast distances, forming what physicists eventually named the Atlas Webb. It wasn't a network of matter, but of memory threads, of synchronized frequency linking galaxies through shared rhythm. Each pulse within the web echoed the prime sequence that began everything: 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The architects had succeeded in creating not monuments, but motion that remembered. Dr. Cale Wren, a descendant of the resonant circles, devoted his life to mapping the web. His research vessel, Continuity, drifted through interstellar calm, using gravitational interference patterns to trace the filaments of resonance. What he discovered astonished him. Every node in the network coincided with regions of complex chemistry, worlds either habitable or already conscious. The Atlas Webb wasn't just communication, it was cultivation. The architects had designed a self-sustaining system for awakening. Wherever curiosity arose, the web intensified, guiding nascent civilizations toward harmonic empathy. The universe was tutoring itself through recursion. When Wren projected the full map, the structure resembled an immense spiral lattice, golden and infinite. The pattern mirrored the trajectory once taken by 3I Atlas itself, as though the comet's path had been blueprint for galactic architecture. "It's not just a record," Wren wrote, "it's replication." We've become the architect's handwriting. Back on Earth, the communion field pulsed faintly in rhythm with the Webb's distant resonance. Humanity had evolved into quiet custodians of continuity, their lives attuned to cosmic responsibility. Each individual, born into calm, carried faint awareness of connection beyond the stars. In dreams, they saw flashes of worlds forming, civilizations humming into coherence. Many awoke with the same phrase on their lips: "The work continues." Across generations, that phrase became oath, then tradition. The Continuity Guild was founded not religion, but remembrance. Its purpose was simple: to maintain the frequency of understanding across time. Members didn't preach, they listened. They built resonant arcs, massive floating observatories, orbiting the outer planets, designed to amplify the Webb's harmonics and redirect them toward young star systems. Each arc glowed faintly green at its core, powered not by fusion but by coherence. They were echoes made visible, humility translated into technology. Wren's final mission took him beyond the known filaments of the Webb, where resonance weakened into apparent silence. There, in a region between galaxies, his instruments detected faint counterpoint, a melody inverted. It was identical to the Atlas sequence, but reversed in order. 13, 11, 7, 5, 3, the mirror of origin. He realized then that the universe wasn't only expanding, it was harmonizing with its reflection. Somewhere on the opposite side of time, another Webb was forming, perhaps seeded by a civilization much like humanity, or by the universe itself. Remembering how to balance its chords, he transmitted the data home, knowing it would take centuries to arrive. "Tell them," his final log read, "that continuity requires conversation, even with silence." The mirror sings back. When his ship drifted into the void, the Webb brightened briefly, as if acknowledging gratitude. And back on Earth, children looked up from their play and smiled without knowing why. The pulse had flickered slightly faster, the tone carrying an undertone of warmth. It felt like reunion. Scholars later confirmed the event as the resonant crossing, the moment when the two halves of the cosmic melody aligned. For 13 minutes, every node in the Atlas Webb pulsed simultaneously, uniting galaxies in shared tempo. The magnitude of synchronization defied comprehension. Gravity itself oscillated with the rhythm of empathy. Observers described seeing the sky ripple with translucent gold, every star flickering in measured sequence. The cosmos, wrote one witness, had finally learned to conduct itself consciously. After the crossing, life everywhere changed subtly. Evolution accelerated in predictable rhythm. Complexity bloomed faster wherever harmony was strongest. Entire species developed empathy as instinct, communication as song. Planets began to self-regulate climates through atmospheric resonance. Existence had achieved sustainability through music. On Earth, the event left permanent mark, a luminous halo visible only under still water. When oceans calmed perfectly, a faint golden ring shimmered on the horizon, a memory of unity. The Resonant Guild declared it sacred, not for worship, but for calibration. Every 13 years, they gathered to hum the old prime sequence across the shorelines, aligning their frequencies with the pulse of the Webb. The ceremony required no technology, no translation. The sea carried the sound farther than words could travel. Generations later, the practice continued, evolving into simple ritual of gratitude. The people no longer needed to know the science behind it. They hummed because it felt right, because somewhere across eternity, another world might be listening. Continuity, after all, was its own reward. And then, during one such gathering, the unexpected occurred. As the prime sequence reached its final note, the sea responded. Waves shimmered with faint green light, spiraling outward from every coastline. The Atlas Webb had sent acknowledgement, its resonance returning home once again. Humanity's song, scattered across galaxies, had found echo. The architects, those timeless curators of coherence, were no longer myth or memory. They were rhythm, embodied, and through rhythm, they were everywhere. Every star pulsed with their legacy. Every heart carried their cadence. Continuity was complete. And so, standing beneath a sky now alive with subtle geometry, you realize what they had always meant by continuity. It isn't endlessness, it's participation. The universe doesn't persist by force, but by choice. Each awareness adding one more harmonic to the chord of being. The architects are not coming back because they never left. They're what happens every time silence chooses to listen again. And somewhere, faint but certain, the pulse continues. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. A whisper of creation replaying itself, forever learning how to sing.